Hello, and I am Lisa Leitner. Thank you for joining me today. We are going to be talking about what you need to be a professional advocate. And I define a professional advocate as someone who is being paid to be an IEP or special education advocate. Or, if you're volunteering in a pretty serious capacity, I mean, for an agency or large scale, things like that, I would say you're a professional advocate. And I mean, just not like the mom to mom, hey, I'm helping out my next door neighbor because I know more about IEPs than she does, and so on, but in a significant capacity. So, what you need to be an advocate, maybe you are thinking about this as a side hustle, a second act. You never know. So if you haven't met me before, again, I'm Lisa Leitner. That little guy there, I can't tell how old this picture is because we're both sitting down, but that little guy right there is 18 now, and he is the reason I got started in this, and he is the reason I am where I am today. He was diagnosed with a chromosome disorder as an infant, and he began receiving services at 6 months of age. When he was in preschool, his preschool sent home a flyer about some advocacy training, and he had just turned 3. I said to my husband, it was a really expensive training. It was $2,000. So this was not insignificant money for us. I said to my husband, we have 20 more years of this ahead of us. And I already knew that I was struggling with IEPs. And I said, let's do this. Again, it's expensive, but we're going to get 20 years out of it. So let's do it. And I did it. But most working advocates have a personal connection of some sort to IEPs on either side of the table. And that is really what makes an ideal advocate. Parents like us who wish to do this for employment, teachers who are retired, or maybe you want to do this in the summer. Maybe you want to do it as a side hustle. Maybe you want to earn some money, weekends. You can't, if you still want to continue teaching, you can advise people, behind the scenes and not attend meetings. Who knows? Other educational staff, as far as my training program, I know that we've had several speech therapists and OTs enroll in the program. We've had retirees enroll in the program. We've had case managers, caseworkers, folks like that, social workers take the program. But you really need to have some familiarity or experience with the IEP process, again, on either side of the table, so that you know the steps of what happens in the IEP process. As part of my training program, yes, I certainly talk about the steps of the IEP process. We talk about IDEA, which is the main law, of course, that governs IEPs. But I think that you really need that element of being immersed in it. It's one thing to say, well, there's evaluations and then there's goals. Until you've actually gone through it, I think that would probably be a very difficult concept to grasp. Of course, what kind of experience you have with the IEP process, there's going to be pros and cons. And unfortunately, when you are an advocate, you are exposed to more negative situations. So that's definitely something to consider. So I'm going to send you this checklist, or this checklist is included, but you need to think about, these are the things that you need to get started, right? What is your why? What is my starting budget? Is this going to be a side hustle? Is this going to be a job? What's my pricing format going to be? Let me move my face. You're going to need a bank account, a separate bank account. We'll talk about that. You need a web presence. You also need written and verbal communication skills, and they have to be decent. The word advocate means to speak for someone. So that's why parents are hiring you, which leads into personality. If you don't have an assertive personality that is comfortable with confrontation and being assertive, then this is not the job for you. That's why parents hire us. They hire us for our IEP knowledge and for sharing a strategy and helping them get what their child needs, but they're hiring us so that we will speak up at meetings so they don't have to. You're also going to need to develop policies for clients. Think about your time that you're investing in this. You're going to need training, and you definitely need a support network. I love working from home. I love the flexibility that it offers my family, and we need that flexibility because of Kevin's health issues. but it's pretty lonely sometimes. I'm sitting here in my home office and sometimes I wish I just had a break room to go to chat with people, and I don't. Just me and my corgi. So first of all, let's talk about training and licenses and certificates. There are a lot of training options out there now. There are a few that have kind of risen to the top, as you would say, and become more well-known than others. I will not be speaking about, or I do not speak about, other training programs. I don't want my words taken out of context. And as far as other programs, I've taken most of them that are the high ticket training programs. And by high ticket, I mean I took one that was $1,100 and the others were $2,000 or $2,400, something like that. So I've taken the bigger high ticket prices, although I have seen people online, and I'm not even making this up. I did see someone recently that is charging $5,000 for some training. So the prices are definitely getting up there. I've taken all of the trainings that are kind of like the programs that people have all heard of. Most of them were very good. There were a few things that I would say, let me just say, I learned something from every training that I took. What we learn is not always positive. Sometimes what we learn is what we don't want to do or how we don't want to be, if that makes any sense. So that's why I don't talk about other programs, because I want to be honest. And again, I'm not here to bash people, and I don't want any of my words taken out of context. But there are training options out there. However, there is no one single license or certification that is required. The industry does not require it, nor is there any one, license or certification that people point to and say, "Oh, that's it. That's the one you need." I often use the analogy, if you wanted to work as a lifeguard, you have to be a certified lifeguard, right? If you want to work as an advocate, you don't need to be certified. But if you wanted to work as a lifeguard, you must be certified. But you could get certified from the American Red Cross. You could get certified from the YMCA. You could get certified from Boy Scouts of America. There's Ellis training. There's a few others. And which do you think is the best, right? If you want to work as a lifeguard, which training program or which certification program do you think is the best? And of course, the Boy Scouts are going to say it's ours, and the YMCA is going to say, no, it's ours. But there are, again, it depends on who you ask, but there are probably just a handful of programs at the top that you would consider. I feel the same way about advocacy training. There are a few programs, mine included, that are kind of at the top that people say, oh yeah, that's a good program. However, the industry does not require a certification. So that is why I don't offer one. It feels disingenuous. When you think of other professions that do require certification, like a certified teacher or a licensing, such as OTs, PTs, right? They have licenses. They have practice acts. They have state codes of what is required to work and things like that. There is no such thing for an advocate. For that reason, I would not expect to get insurance reimbursement, nor do I expect that to happen anytime soon. That's something I hear a lot. Well, and insurance should pay for an advocate. There would have to be, that basic minimum criteria and how we're going to define what is advocacy, what is an advocate, and all that. And that's, the industry just isn't there yet. So I wouldn't expect that for insurance reimbursement. Some parent agencies, some state parent training centers offer grants. They offer financial assistance for advocates, things like that. But again, there's not going to be insurance reimbursement in anytime soon because of that license certification piece, which is just not required to work in the industry. You need the knowledge. You absolutely need professional training of some kind. but there is no certification that is required. Whoops. So the other thing, if you want to start in this, step 1 is that this is not for the faint-hearted. By the time a parent realizes that their situation is not so great and finally gets up the nerve to find an advocate, trust me, they're going to look at your website or your Facebook page several times before they work up the nerve to call you or email you. By the time they finally make that decision of, I need an advocate and I'm going to pay for an advocate, the situations are often pretty dire. So it's not for the faint-hearted, because nobody ever calls an advocate when things are going well, right? Like, yay, I got everything I wanted in my IEP meeting and my son's just making so much progress. I just had to call you and let you know. Nobody ever calls me for that. So you just want to keep that in mind, because it matters. So you want to think about, what is your why? What is going to keep me going for this? Because sometimes hearing the stories is a little hard to take. The success, and that's the other funny thing, is that once you have a client and you go through the whole process and you're with them for weeks or months in the IEP meeting, and you get them a solid IEP that they want, and that the child's needs are being met, then they disappear, right? Like, I would love for them to call me in 6 months, like, just let me know how it's going. But they don't. So the other thing is that you definitely want to develop a business plan, right? What is your budget? Where are you going to find clients? How are you going to start this? How much are you going to charge? What are your tech skills? Because you're going to need, again, this online presence. One of the hardest things for me to do was get my Stripe, and Stripe is my online payment processor. Getting that set up for me was a nightmare. I struggle with the tech stuff, and so setting up some of those things was challenging and definitely tested my patience. Do you have the personality for this, and do you have the desire? Going to IEP meetings is one of those things that parents can kind of talk about and nod and laugh together, because IEP meetings are so notoriously difficult. Like, to sign up and say, raise your hand and say, I'm going to volunteer to go to IEP meetings all day, every day as a career. Again, not for the faint-hearted. So you want to make sure that you have the personality and the desire to do all this and do the business stuff that is required at the back end. Now, I just want to add here that I am talking a lot about starting your own business. And yes, there are agency advocates, but those positions are very few and far between. You can certainly, look for them and apply for one, but there just aren't a lot of agency advocates. I only know of a handful in my county, and there's almost 1 million people in my county and a lot of agencies. Okay. You're going to have to set up an online presence. It's just the world we live in. People expect to be able to find you online. You're going to need to find a way to take payments online. So you're going to need some kind of payment processor and a way to charge people and invoice people. You're going to need a way to schedule people. And it's not always so easy to just do emails back and forth and like, Tuesday at 3, does that work for you? And all that back and forth. It's much easier to, in the long run, to have an online scheduler kind of set up. But also, clients need to be able to find you. You're going to go out and find clients, but they also need to be able to find you. If any of you are looking at all this and being like, oh my gosh, this sounds like so much work, know that if you take my training, I do cover a lot of this stuff in the professional advocate portion. Okay, this next item, you definitely need a method of banking, accounting, and record keeping. And it needs to be separate from your family's stuff. Trust me, you want to do this at the get-go and not after you've been doing it for a few years. I, was working for an agency, and then I just kind of started taking some clients, and we had money coming in and things like that, and money going out. And it was just incredibly difficult for a year or two. When it came time to doing taxes, I was just terrible. I wasn't terrible. I didn't have the systems in place to do all this. And then, we're looking at things and you look at like a Staples purchase and you're like, well, was I at Staples? Was I doing back to school shopping for the kids, or was I making copies of IEP records? Like it just was really, really hard to figure out what had been a business expense and what hadn't. So I would definitely recommend that you keep it separate. You're also going to need to think about like, how are you going to track your time? There's a ton of apps for this stuff now, which is awesome. And a lot of these like time tracking apps and things like that weren't available when I first started in 2010. It's kind of weird to think of how far we've come in 15 years, because like you talk about things like, certain apps and things, and like in 2010, if you think about it, most of us didn't even have smartphones yet. A lot of us didn't. But there's a lot of apps and stuff for that stuff now. And the other thing, let me move my face again. The other thing that you definitely need is you need a support network of some kind. That is one of the biggest takeaways I got from other trainings I took. Most other training that you take is once and done, right? You go to a conference for a weekend, you do a training, even if it's a series of trainings where you meet like once a month for a year or whatever it is. Once you're done, you're done. And if you build relationships and network with people in the training that you keep in contact with, great, you have them. But what mine offers is that you are a lifetime member. So anytime you want to come back and join those live chats, anytime you want to redo some of the training, any of it, it's there for you, because this can be a very isolating job. It can be a very depressing job. Parents call you again with their worst stories of things happening to their kid. And it's nice to have that group that we have on Thursdays to sometimes it's just to vent about different things. We do a lot of idea sharing. We do a lot of troubleshooting. We do a lot of networking. The advocates in the group, they're fantastic. And a lot of them say that alone makes this program worth it. Those live chats, that they would pay for that. So my face again. So again, if you are thinking about, okay, I want to be a professional advocate, you're going to need, first of all, you're going to need the processes. You're going to need like your method for client intake, scheduling, and managing the day-to-day, the nuts and bolts. You're also going to need those hard skills concrete information. You're going to need to know the IEP process, where to find information, how to write letters, negotiation skills. Then there's the soft skills. You're going to need patience, optimism, grit, and professionalism, just to name a few. But put all together, I love it. I honestly love it, and don't see me ever doing anything else, right? So choose a job you love, and you will never have to work a day in your life. And even though I work very hard and I work a lot of long hours, it just doesn't feel like work to me. It really doesn't. So with all that said, I want you to consider the Don't IEP Alone Academy. Right now, it is $397. If you put in the code webinar44 for watching this webinar, you will get $44 off. What you get for that $397 is you get access to all my tools and resources. And listen, I give away the farm. I let people use my onboarding documents. I let you all use my pricing documents, my client contracts, my email templates, any of it. It's all there. New in 2023, we added training from attorneys. So several times a year. So for 2023 and 2024, we had 9 total. So we're talking about 4 or 5 each year. So 4 or 5 times a year, I bring in an attorney or expert in our area, in our field, to train us on something. For 2025, for the winter, I have 4 lined up. We're going to talk about, one is going to talk about negotiation skills. One used to work for the Office of Civil Rights, so we're going to get to peek behind the curtain at OCR and hear from one of their former attorneys. We're going to talk about divorce and IEPs. And I forget what the fourth person is talking about. It escapes me. But even if you can't attend those live trainings, it all goes in the training library, so you'll always have access to it. And it's great, great stuff. So there's ongoing training. There's training from attorneys. There's ongoing training. I'm always adding to the training library. One thing that I'm also doing in 2025 is that my core content, which currently is 7 recorded sessions. So if you want to swipe my advocacy strategy as to how I get to yes for my clients, you can do those 7 core content sessions. However, I am re-presenting those in 2025, and it's been chunked down into many more weeks. I think it's like 13 weeks now. That was at the request of participants who felt that those 7 sessions are great, but it's just too much information for one session. And they felt like they told me they were pausing it, like doing some of it and pausing and coming back to it because it was too much to cover in one session. So, hey, we chunk down stuff for our kids, so I will chunk down stuff for you. And that's exactly what I did. So that's that. And that explains my 4-step process, which we'll get to in a second. Then there are deep dives, and the deep dives, we talk about a specific IEP topic. We talked about discipline. We talk about behavior. I did a training on, FBAs and behavior, how to write an IEP goal, placement, discipline. I said that. There's just so many. There's 58 of them. So there's that. And then of course, if you do on the live trainings, there are Q&As. And there are the Thursday advocate chats, if that interests you. And so this is my trademarked 4-step process to advocacy. And again, this is how I move my clients to yes. It's 4 steps that I use over and over and over again with all of my clients. And again, I give away the farm in this training, and I tell you exactly what I do with each of my clients step by step. And I broke down these 4 steps into 7 videos, and now it's almost twice as many. So it's going to be smaller chunks but you're going to go through and you'll know exactly if you have IEP knowledge, but not a lot of advocacy knowledge, you can just use the strategy. It's fantastic. I get emails all the time from people who are like, oh my God, it worked. And I'm like, yeah, it does work. So it works. I make it very difficult for IEP teams to say no. So as far as the future roadmap, again, the new things coming this year are redoing the training into smaller chunks and adding the attorneys. We're also going to be adding some more deep dives. I got some ideas from participants on some things they wanted for 2025. I haven't nailed down any definites yet. But again, with 58 topics out there, there's not a lot left. But hopefully, of course, I'll think of something. There's always something. We just haven't thought of it yet, right? The IEPs are this like huge, encompassing, cumbersome process. So again, one price is lifetime access and everything, all of it's included. So with the professional advocacy component, you can use my pricing contract, my onboarding documents, anything that I use, you are welcome to use. So I hope to see you there. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and email us. But other than that, I hope to see you at our training.